Hi, I'm Chris. I'm going to show you a few useful tips for debugging auto layout problems in Xcode's View Debugger. So I'm going to start with the sample app that I put together. It's just a top view and a bottom view. Um, so let's run it real quick. And you see we have the top view, it's green, and the bottom view is blue. Um, so let's say I want to debug some of my constraints. I want to figure out what it's going to look like if I modify some constant values and I don't want to recompile. So we have this button down here where you can debug your view hierarchy. Very useful tool. Definitely explore it if you haven't yet. So I'm going to select this top view here and over on the right here. And if you don't have that panel, you can always do a command option 5 to get yourself there, or command option 0 toggles it out. So we have this view selected, and it shows us which constraints we have. So let's say I want to change the height constraint from the debugger. So let's highlight my height constraints. If there are more than one here, it'll show up here. So I'm going to double click this one, and it brings me into the constraint itself. So what I'm going to do, come on, slide up. Guess I can't. There we go. So go back to my height constraint. So it gives me this memory address, and that's the memory address of the constraint itself. So I'm going to copy that. Now you can come into your console down here, type E for expression, and you're going to start with an open square brace like in Objective-C, 2 left parens, and then we're going to cast it to an NS layout constraint, and it doesn't look like autocomplete works here, so you have to type out the whole thing. Paste in your address that you copied, go to the other side of the paren, and we're basically just going to do a method call on that. So we can say set constant, and it was 100, so let's make it 400. And you notice it doesn't change here. It's because we're still paused in the debugger. So we need to start the execution again. So you can hit here to resume. And here now we have our 300, 400 pixel high top view and the bottom view adjusted accordingly. So now you can keep doing this even without going in the view debugger. Just if you hit the pause, like to pause the execution, as long as you're still in that same view controller and nothing's changed, you can hit up, brings back the same memory address, nothing has changed there, and then now I'm going to say change it to 50. Hit enter, hit resume. It didn't update immediately, but we just need to send an interaction to the phone, and then it adjusted right there. So this has been really useful for me to figure out how the view changes without recompiling it a bunch of times when building out these constraints programmatically. So while we're here, I'm just going to demonstrate real quick that you can use this technique for things other than your auto layout. So we're going to, oops, I want this one. Go back to the view debugger, and we'll take a look at this view itself. So we're going to look at the view, grab the memory address, and let's change the background color. So it's the same thing as before. Left square, left paren, cast it to a UI view, and let's say set background color, and UI color red, or is it red color, I think. There we go. So you're going to hit resume again, or you can use command control Y, and you come back here, let's touch the screen, and then our view turns red. Next, I'm just going to show you how to debug between layout priorities. So let's change this a little bit. Let's give our bottom view a height constraint equal, or rather greater than or equal to constant. So we're going to say our bottom view needs to be at least 100 high, but it should grow larger given the other layout conditions. So let's change this bottom anchor. So instead of being equal to -50, let's say it's less than or equal to -50. And then let's give that a required priority. So it needs to be, this is the tightest the gap between the top view and the bottom view can get. And then we'll have a second one that'll be the priority that or it's the constraint that we prefer. So let's say this is a 300 gap between top and bottom. So as long as there's room, it's going to force the views to be 300 apart. But then you'll see as the top view grows, it'll get to a point where bottom view becomes 100, and then that's when this constraint is going to break, and it's just going to keep enforcing this constraint here to make sure there's at least a gap of 50, but it can be greater than 50, or less than -50, I guess. So let's just see what that looks like in the simulator. Oh, and I should mention this SetPriority thing. It's a quick little helper that I added through an extension here on NS layout constraint, where you pass in a priority and it returns self. That way it makes chaining all these constraints a lot easier. So anyway, let's go back to the simulator. So you'll see that's 100 there, and then that's 100 down there. What's going on? Something's wrong. This. That should be an equal to. Because those were very far apart. There we go. So this should be 300. This is 100. And this is greater than 100, obviously, because it's larger than that. So if we come into the view debugger, you can confirm this. Take a look at the constraint between the two. There's two of them here. And that dotted line, or that dashed line, it indicates that the constraint you're looking at has a priority less than 1,000, 1,000 being required. Ours is 750 because we used default high. So let's say we want to break one of these constraints. So let's start by just making the height constraint of this top view. As before, we grab it, we add it in here, and it's layout constraint. Oops. Right, set constant, and then let's say 300. Come back here, and now you see it pushed down this blue view because it needs this 300 gap, and it's still legal to have this 300 gap because this blue view here, the bottom view, is a height of 123, which is that meets our other constraint of being greater than 100. So you can see now we have our two constraints here, right? It's the one that's greater than 300 and one that is, or one that's greater than the -50, less than -50, and one that's equal to 300. So now if we come back to our console and we, let's say, make it 400, so we're going to add 100, and come back, notice the green, the top one, changed. It had a greater height increase than the bottom one. And that's because the bottom has that height anchor that's requiring it to be at least 100 high. Right. and then you can see that's still 100. So what happens if we make that top one, let's say 550, it's going to close that gap even more. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. Do the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.